Welcome to Taylor's Trick-Taking Table. I'm Taylor, and I just got back from Cincinnati, Ohio. There was a trick-taking convention called T7 there. It was actually kind of close to the Cincinnati Bengals playoff game when they played the Raiders. And later on today, they're playing the Chiefs, and I'm going to wager that they're going to probably win by 3 points, maybe in overtime. The game hasn't happened yet, but I guess that Boru is going to throw 38 times, complete about 23 of those for around 250 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And, you know, kick returns, maybe C. Evans gets 1 reception and runs about 26 yards. But who knows? We'll see what happens in the game. I always like to make just random, wacky predictions and see if I'm right. But enough about football. That's not why we're here. We're here to talk about T7. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of show a fun montage of my time in Cincinnati, in the Cincinnati area, mostly playing trick-taking games, sometimes eating weird food, Cincinnati food, and then sometimes seeing the Cincinnati sights. The convention itself was amazing though, as you can even just tell by this wonderful, wonderful logo done by Say Beppu, who did other artwork that I'll show next video that is just fantastic. Has to do a little bit with this channel, a lot of it about this channel. But enough about all that. Let's just go to the montage. And then after the montage, I thought it'd be fun to kind of just talk about all the trick-taking games I played and cover a bit of the detail, a bit of what made them interesting, and maybe go in a chronological order. That video was filmed pretty late at night, so it's kind of rambly, and very long. You might see the length of this video and be a little bit deterred. But the premise is going to be a montage real quick, and then also you can jump to maybe trick-taking games that sound interesting to you, because I did play a lot of wild ones, a lot of rare ones that were only at that convention, because James Nathan, who ran the con, is very well versed and has a huge trick-taking collection. The library there was insane and had so many titles that were just fun to look at and just see the wild things that they do. And I know this channel is all about what wild trick-taking things exist, so it was kind of like a kid in a candy store, really, situation. But yeah, so let's go to the montage, and then after we'll chat about all the games I played. Oh, before we go to the montage, I did just want to say, James usually has an amazing write-up about the trick-taking conventions on Opinionated Gamers. I'll include the old ones in the description and also in the comments, and maybe the new one if it's up yet. I'm not sure if it will be by the time this video goes live, but definitely check those out. But now to the montage. Yeah, I kind of like what you're doing. Change the music a little bit, maybe like a fun club mix. Show like the side of a plane wing, you know, do a classic like travel vlog situation.
It's summer 2021. It's summer 2021. It's summer 2021. And we're all having fun. I can't wait to see my friends. Hang out until the summer ends. Until then it's just vibes. We all love to feel alive. Listening to music, watching lots of movies, eating lots of food and hanging in jacuzzis. Done with all the worries, eating some McFlurries. Till next year not to come in a hurry. Don't come too fast, 2022. Me and my friends aren't done having fun yet. Not even close. It's summer 2021. It's summer 2021. It's summer 2021. And we're all having fun. It's summer 2021.
music choice you should have picked. Winter 2022 is when the event was. Why'd you pick a summer 2021 very dated song? That was a horrible song too. The mixing, the singing, it was all really bad. Just completely changed the song in cover. Oh, okay. Woo! That montage got a little crazy at the end there. Sorry about that. That was the Jungle Gyms kind of theme park grocery store. It was a wild treat. I hope those images kind of gave you a little bit of a taste. But let's circle back. Let's get back into what I think would be fun is to kind of do a recap of just the games I played, mostly trick-taking. I'll give a big alert if it's not trick-taking. But covering kind of their hooks or initial impressions or just kind of fun thoughts about the games that I got to play, because it was definitely like a trick-taking paradise, really. Playing with people who love trick-taking, playing games that I never have a chance to play. Fun experimental designs, classic games, old ones that I haven't played before, new ones that I never heard of. So it was really, really cool to kind of run the gamut and just have this wild trick-taking experience. So that'd be fun to just run through them just in order of how the weekend went. and throw some images up and show y'all what I got to play. So I'll just be looking at my phone with the images as I pop them up there and just chatting about, you know, in order of the games we played. I think the first one was funny because I showed up, got a tour of the house because we stayed at like an Airbnb, and the first game was a 6-player Liste and Tucke, which I've covered before on the channel, and I think it's one of my favorite games. The funny thing though is I've never played it at 6. So very first game we sit down, we played at 6, and it is long at 6. You play hands per player, and even though it was extremely long, I'd say, it didn't outstay its welcome. I just adore that game so much. Every trick is fun, leading's fun, being the hammer, the one at the end is really fun. What colors do you go for is super fun. It's interesting at 4 or 5 really that because there's 4 colors, those kind of fit into, like, players pigeonhole themselves a little earlier, whereas at 6 near the end you're like, I just need to win a trick. A lot of the times 2 or 3 players just didn't have any cards, and so it was interesting at 6 to see a little bit of that desperation come through more so than 4 or 5. At 4 or 5 you almost get to an avoidance game sometimes because players get slotted in and they just, the last few tricks are like, I don't really want that because it's going to mess up my score. Whereas 6 was, you know, fighting for scraps a little bit. So it's awesome to see a game that I like so much at a different player count and see it feel pretty different but still kind of a classic feel. Next up was Touchdown Heroes, and woof, what a wild game. So I have it actually right here, and the premise is it's football. Funny enough, Canadian football, kind of mixed with American football, but the premise is you're 2 competing football teams and you're playing football. So you have like a field, you have like a football field, and there's a football token. I don't know if you can really see that there. There it is. And players will be playing trick taking to move the ball down the field on their turn. They have 3 downs to make it, and there's a kicking and punting, and the trick play, which is super interesting in the game, is when you lead to the trick, because the offense team with the ball, they're the players who can lead to the trick only. They pick whether it's going to be a run play or a pass play, and if it's a run play, it's must follow, and if it's a pass play, it's may follow. Super clever. I've never seen that. That's a pretty strong hook in a game. But the other kind of twist is that every card in the game, I don't know if you can see this, every card in the game has a power that if it's ever played offsuit, it triggers. And that adds a lot of chaos to the game, a lot of wackiness. And in addition to that, each player has like a personal power, like a special power, that they can trigger once per game. So that adds even more kind of powers and craziness. I've played it a few times now, and I like it. It's wacky. I've never seen that concept of choosing whether it's may follow or must follow. And I wish that worked a little more. Most of the time people just play must follow. So maybe you just need to play it more to get into that must follow and may follow. But as of now, it's interesting. It's pretty wacky. I just wish that hook was investigated more. So maybe a game will come down the line that handles that. Or maybe, again, I just need to play it more and see how that goes. But that play of it was fun. There's a lot of kind of... Any game with powers, right, will have a bunch of questions. Like Tournament at Camelot has a lot of those situations, right, where you just have a bunch of... I don't need to hold this up. You get the idea. Has a bunch of those powers where some things will trigger and you're not sure. It's almost like you need an FAQ of like, what happens if this happens and then that happens. That happens almost in Claim too, where powers bounce off each other in weird ways. So that's kind of what would happen a little bit in this. It's not the worst, but there are times when you're like, what does this mean? The next one was Nirvana, which was the Korean board games republishing of Roll Right Daifugo, which is like a roll right climbing shedding game. it was fun to kind of show people. It was really quick, so you can kind of get a session of it and get the idea of the game down. We played it at 3 players, so it was kind of a fun back and forth. I like in that one where at 3 especially, you don't know whether to make a bunch of one small number or a really high single. So that was cool. It got down to I think 1 or 2 cards at the end, which was nice. I never like that. In that game, sometimes it can happen where someone just like runs it out and everyone's just like, okay. Like we played Roll Right and built this hand and then someone just like dumpstered everyone. So it's nice when that game, especially on the first play for some people, can kind of end a little more nail-bitery. That's always nice. And then with the same group, because it was just me and 2 other people, we played Familiar's Trouble. And again, have a video for that. The nice thing about that session of Familiar's Trouble was it was the best I've ever done, which was cool. It's funny to have just met these people like an hour or so ago, and then sit down and we play a trick-taking game that needs kind of people on the same page and people to be good at trick-taking, essentially. And to play with people who are so well-versed in trick-taking and like they know what they're doing, to be able to score really well. We were, I think, 2 points or so, or maybe even 1 point off the best score in the game, which I haven't even gotten anywhere near that close. So it was really cool to sit down, do amazingly well. I think it was the best they had done too, so it was kind of this fun synergy. Yeah, just to sit down and do really well with some strangers. There's such like a funny and fun energy to it. Next I played Mizerka, which is a public domain game, and the premise is everyone has to do the same contract eventually. It's kind of like Kofir, yes, where the premise is you get dealt a hand, you get dealt part of your hand, kind of like Tichu. You only get part of it before you have to make a bet, and then you choose a trump suit, or you choose whether it's no trump, and everyone has to eventually call each of the suits as trump once per the game. So you're kind of hedging your bets of like, is this the best hand to call this as trump for now, or do I wait? And that was fun. I had seen that, in Coffee Yas and another game, so it wasn't like too different. It worked pretty well. But the interesting thing about this game was it's 3 players, and the person who makes the bet, they have to do pretty well, and then the next person has to do okay, and then the last person just has to like barely do anything good. Because how it works is the person who makes the bet can exchange with the cards left over, which is like a fourth of the deck, and then whatever they don't exchange with, the next person gets to exchange with, and then whatever the second and the first person don't exchange with, the last person gets it. So like there's 13 cards, right? Because it's just a standard deck. There's 13 cards left over. Say the person who declared takes 8 of them, the next person takes like 3 of them, so there's only 2 left. So the last person, who just needs to maybe win 1 or 2 tricks, doesn't have much to exchange, but they're pretty much off the hook. So it was a nice game where the tension was funny, where you're bidding, right? So there's a ton of pressure and you're nervous. But right after the round where you bid, you're on the hammer, which is like the least pressure ever. I don't think I've played a game where it was so stressful and then not stressful. I guess the crew is kind of like that, where if you're the commander or the captain, you're terribly stressed. And then the next time when you're not the commander or the captain, you're having a great time because you're not the one who has to like take a bunch of tasks or whatever. So it kind of felt like that, where you're super stressed, less stressed, a little stressed, super stressed. So it had like a fun wave to it. It's definitely a little longer. It's more of like an evening game, but it was fun. It was really cool for a public domain game. The next one we played was Luz, and again, I have a video for this. The interesting thing was I left Luz the first few times I played it for the video not like the hottest. I thought it was good. I thought it was fun, but compared to other Taiki designs like Dwa or Dois or whatever, or Caddy or American Bookshop, just like his classic ones, I left it a little lukewarm just compared to those. But it was really fun to come back to it without such like this high expectation of like, oh, it's a Taiki design, and just come back to it showing a couple people who hadn't played just this interesting design. And it was fun to have those fresh eyes where it's not like held up to like a bizarre standard, but just like looking at it like a game, like just like, oh, this is a small twist and the game is just this, and how does it play? And it played really well. Like, it was really cool to go back to it and play it again with just different expectations. I'm someone who, I think expectations color a lot of how I perceive something, like movies or games or anything. So it was nice to come back to it with a blank slate, kind of sorts, and have it just exceed what I was expecting. It was cool to see players that we played with. They were big in Hanabi. They were Hanabi fans. So it was cool to show them a game that kind of used a little bit of those muscles, and then see and kind of chat about the comparisons to Hanabi afterward, which was really fun. Oh, man. So we played this, which was Skull King Dice, near the end of the night, and I was passing out, essentially. I had like 3 hours of sleep in like 2 or 3 days, because right before I flew over, I took a red eye, didn't sleep, and then the night before I got like 2 or 3 hours, so I was just like terribly exhausted. And so then we played this game, which is nuts. So I don't know if you've played Skull King. It's based on Skull King, where in Skull King, you get dealt one card, you bid on how many tricks you think you're going to win out of that one trick, and then you get dealt 2 cards, you bid on how many tricks, and then 3, then 4, then 5. This is like a growing game. But when you get dealt the cards, like, the card is a card, it stays what it is. So if you get dealt like a trump, like high trump, you're like, I probably have a good chance of winning. Let me bet that I'll win a trick, right? In this game, you get dealt, well, you pull out of a bag, dice. And then you make your bid for how many tricks you think you're going to win, just knowing that you have this type of dice. And you look at the score, or like you look at your shield, your player's shield that like hides the dice, right? And it says like, oh, this die can win maybe 1/6 of the time. And so you bid on like the most loose whims of an idea, and then you roll your die to see what it actually is. So you don't even know, you don't know what card you're bidding on. You it's nuts. I remember watching a video by the Game Boy Geek about it, and he was pretty harsh on it, because it's just like insane. Like, you're bidding on nothing really. Something. You're bidding on something. But like, even the strongest die in the game can just lose. Like 2 of the 3 faces or like 1 of the 3 faces is just like instant lose. So you're just like, I have no idea what's going to happen. But it's great. That's like the perfect time to play a game like that, where you are sleep deprived. Even normal conversation makes no sense. So might as well play a trick-taking game that makes no sense. It was a hoot. It was a blast. It was a lot of people expecting to win, screaming when they don't, or expecting to lose and screaming when they do win, and just bids being messed up. It was a hoot. It was a great time. And then instead of going to sleep, I decided to play another trick-taking game by the same designer, Kuro, who did Touchdown Heroes. So as you can see, the same MD. The premise is your hero's fighting a villain, but if you hit the villain too much or like kind of go too hard, you destroy the city. So you don't want to like blow them up. And how that's kept track of is like the value of the trick you're playing. So like if someone plays a 6, then someone plays a 3, then someone plays a 4, you're adding up that total, right? 6, 4, 3, 13. And the villain is at like 12, right? So you don't want to go over it, because the person, I think, who played the biggest value is like on the hook for that. I think out of like most of the trick takers of the weekend, it plays like the cadence of the game plays way different than I expected. But the premise is, long story short, it's kind of like American Bookshop. You keep track of the value. You don't want to go over, because if you go over, whoever highest takes a hit. But it was just interesting because it played way different than I expected, and you had to have a way different mindset. It also has a ton of crazy powers. Like the villain you're playing has powers. Every person has powers. You have cards that are like modifiers that could plus or minus or any value to your card that you played, you know? So it can like lower the value so you actually hit the target. It's a whole thing. I'm describing this poorly, but it was fun. It was cool. I think end of the night, I have like 2 brain cells left, so I don't know how well I played, but it was really cool to see such a wacky mechanism still work. Next, I played a trio of games that weren't trick takers, but the general conceit was really interesting. So one was Silencio, and the other was Silent Planet, where the premise is players are trying to solve this puzzle of sorts without talking. In Silencio, you're trying to play all the cards in your hand. It's kind of like a shedding game, I guess. in the loosest sense of the term. And then in Silent Planet, you're also trying to play certain cards in certain order. It was interesting because right after we played those, which is all about being silent, we played Sink or Swim, where the designer was there, which was really rad. Where the premise was kind of flipped on the head, where Silencio and Silent Planet is about trying to complete a goal without talking or like quarterbacking. Whereas Sink or Swim was like, you can say whatever you want. You can, in fact, later on, a lot of the time it's meant to be like, you do this, you do this, you do this. Because it's a timed game where you're essentially like in a mad rush to complete all these different objectives. So it was cool, I think, as just like a design study of back and forth, like the same idea for a game, like complete objective as a team. But some of them are like, don't talk. The other one's like, talk as much as you can, as fast as you can, and try to get it done. So those are really fun, especially like as a break from trick taking. Next we played Nana, which, oh my god, just has the best art by Sai. Whew. But it's like a memory go fish game, which seems like young. You know, it seems like maybe like the description maybe sounds like a kid's game, but it is so much fun. Oh my gosh, I had a blast. It was my most played game at the convention. Just quick and fun, and just like the perfect reprieve after playing like a thinky trick-taking game. Just an absolute blast. Then we played this trick-taking game that's like a bluffing game. It's kind of like cockroach poker, but here's like the cover, and the premise is you have these cards that have a snake on them. So like, let's say this has a snake on them, and the snake has like a mouth at the top, and when you play to the trick, you cover the head of the snake, and you play into the trick. And if the snake has a fang on it, it's a bad card that you don't want. But if it doesn't have a fang, it's a card you do want. So you play to the trick, and then players will just like look at it and be like, okay, should I play to the trick? Because how it works is there's like 3 suits, and every time you offsuit, that becomes the stronger suit. So it's just very easy to like win a trick, but you just don't know if someone's bluffing and played like a bad card. So you don't know if you want to win that card. It was interesting. I think the strategy, whatever strategy there was, kind of became a little bit more apparent later, but it was pretty much like cockroach poker bluffing, like, do you want this? And then it was like, okay, do I want this? But you could kind of get into players' heads, and there was a classic thing where a lot of time when people are leading, they would lead a certain way, so you can kind of read into that. For the most part, it was just like a bluffing trick-taking game. Not the worst, but it'd be cool to see that idea of like when you play to the trick, you cover up some information, maybe in a different game. But it was good. It was okay. Then we played Voodoo Prince, which is one of my favorite games. I love the idea of trying one of your favorite games with a whole different group of people, like a whole group of strangers, and seeing if it still holds up. Because I found that sometimes I might just like a game because the people I play with, like my gaming group, I just like them, you know. They're a gregarious bunch. Am I using that word right? Where they can make a bad game fun. So it was nice to be like, oh, this actually is a really, really good game. It holds up the person test, like the stranger test, where the game still is really, really fun to play. And the strangers were also super nice and so much fun to play with. So again, I think it was fun to just play games with them as well. So it could just still be a group issue, but it was awesome to verify that, like, wow, this is awesome. Then we played Short Zuit, which is a game I made that uses a standard deck where the premise is you're trying to short suit as much as you can and then win tricks an equal amount, because for every time you short suit and also win a trick, you get points. It was fun. It's always nerve-wracking showing your own design. I personally hate it. It makes me want to vomit, but I think it went okay. It was fun to play with strangers, and again have kind of a chat about design where you don't know the people, so maybe they're a little bit more honest, or maybe they're not honest because you're a stranger. Who knows? But it was fun. It was fun to play that. Then I went outside and played Lines of Action. Whew, man, that was a good game. I'm actually a sucker for abstract games. You might not know that about me. You might think I only play trick-taking games, but Lucas showed me this one where the premise is you want to get all your pieces together in a group, and once you do, you win. And what's interesting is you can capture the other player's pieces, but it just shrinks the number of pieces that they need to group together. So it's a really fun push and pull of like, should I capture them? Because it kind of breaks up their group, but also it's less pieces that they need to touch, so it's technically a little bit easier for them. Really fun. It was outside in the very, very cold Cincinnati weather, and after we played, I wanted to immediately play again. So a sign of a good game is even when you might have hypothermia, it wasn't that cold. But even though when it's really cold, you still want to play again. It was awesome. So, and Lucas made a great point where you can play it with just like a chess set, or checker set or whatever. So I think it's probably a game I want to try next time someone wants to play chess. Finally, we played So Clover. We actually played it twice. The first time went great. The second time did not go great, for me personally. The second time we played, it was really late, and I remember... So the main... How the game works is you put down these words, and every side of a four-leaf clover will have two words that you have to kind of group together. So like one of them might be like potato and jeans or something. And you might put starch, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully that's a good example on the fly. But so you do that, right? And then you remove those cards, you shuffle them, especially with one extra card, and then you put them out. And the players, it's a co-op game, have to find out what was your original orientation. So we played the game, and the first time went well. The second time we were like, oh, let's add two cards to make it super, super hard. And the person who owned the game was like, oh, that's really hard to do. Like, I don't think we're going to do it. And we're like, let's just try it. So it was it's a 5-player game. The first 3 people, we get it perfectly. Like, it was great. I'm the 4th person, and I'm just agonizing because I was having a really tough time. And we essentially failed on me. And then it goes to the last person, and then we get that one perfect. So it was like, we almost did a perfect round of like really hard mode, except for me. So I felt bad. But what are you gonna do? You know, if you had to combine moon and bin, what word combines moon and bin? Then we played segment tricks. That was really fun to show a bunch of people who hadn't played. I think Taiki's designs just land so well, especially with trick-taking aficionados, where you're just like, this is the hook, simple hook, let's play. And it's always fun to just dive into teaching that game. There's a fun like aha moment where people are like, oh yeah, it's a really fun tension. I accidentally messed up and in the first hand I forgot to mention that you can zero bid, which definitely would have changed someone's hand, so I felt super bad about that. We ended up playing it out, but thank you for being gracious. I feel like my brain is overflowing with trick-taking rules, and there's so many different ways to have a trick-taking game that it's getting all lost. I'm getting lost in the sauce. Speaking of sauce, I actually had chili spaghetti afterward. That was insane. Really interesting meal. I went 4-way, so I had beans and cheese. I didn't realize one dish could have that much cheese, which is good. It was fun. The spaghetti, or the chili had like cinnamon in it. It's kind of like sweet sauce. It was interesting. It was really, really interesting. You're supposed to eat it kind of like a pancake. Yeah, when in Rome, when in Cincinnati. It was interesting. And then after we went to ice cream, and the ice cream was like some of the best ice cream I've ever had. So that was wild. But yeah. Chili spaghetti. Then we played Man-Eating House, which is a fascinating game. So it's based on like Japanese horror movies, essentially, where there's like an evil spirit, like a yokai, and then there's crazy, creepy locations that they haunt, like wells or houses or whatever. And then there's weapons to defeat them, and then there's kids that try to like fight them. And I say that because the deck is made up of 3 suits where it's kids, weapons, locations, spirits in all the suits. So it's kind of this crazy org chart of like a deck. And then on top of that, there's a flow chart of what will happen. So like if an old man is played or a dog is played, or a kid is played, or a certain type of kid is played, and then a weapon's played, and a spirit's played, or if a location's played, it's a huge flowchart. On top of that, it's a partnership game, and on top of that, if like certain cards are played, it just wipes out all the craziness, and it becomes like a standard trick taker. Insane. We played 2 hands of it, and I don't even think I was close to wrapping my brain around it, but it was interesting. I don't know if I've seen such a rule set for what was effectively like a 22 card deck. Or no, 30 something, 35 card deck, with just like a crazy amount of flowchart and flowchart and breakdown, like a deck breakdown. But it was cool. I definitely played again. The art was great. The theme is wild, and I think the fact that it's a partnership game could lead to some interesting like back and forth and like setting up your partner or like playing off what they do. Try to get points. Then we played Salvage, which I'm going to cover next month. That is kind of like Hearts, but with bidding to mitigate points. I think it went okay. Some of the bidding mechanic I've seen people bounce off of, and I think that's more of like the final thoughts for that video. But I think the overall game went well. Then we played Zap Zop, which is my prototype for a deck building trick taking game. That'll be coming out later. We're still ironing out the wrinkles and sorting out some of the stuff. I think it went okay. It's a prototype, so I think some of the flow was to be smoothed in a way. But I showed it to people who had like really great thoughts and like kind of feedback on how to make the game even smoother and better. So that's always nice. So that was fun to do. And again, showing off your own designs makes me want to vomit. But it was fun. It was a good time. Then we played Master of Rules, which I think was like a sleeper hit for me. I really, really enjoyed it. The premise is you have cards with values, and then you have cards that are like rules. And when it comes to you in the trick, you can play either a value of card or a rule. And the whole idea of the game is after it goes around twice and everyone has a rule and a value, you just need your rule to be true. So one of the rules is like total up the cards in the trick and make sure it's not over 23 or whatever. Or one of them is like, oh, the person to your right, you just need to make sure that they win. So what's interesting is you have this like really fun push and pull of, do I play a rule or do I play a value first? So like in that one where you want the limit to be under 23, maybe play the value first of like a 1 or 2, so you don't let people know that you need the trick to be low, so that they don't ruin it with like a 9 or something, right? Because if you play, oh, I want the trick to be low first, and you don't play a value yet, there's a whole round where people can just look at that and be like, oh, you want a high value? Like, nah. And like, they'll just play like really high cards. But the tough thing is, if you wait too long and you play a value first, when it comes back to you to play a rule, you can't play what else is out there. So if someone plays the low limit first, then you got hosed, unless that's the only card you can play. So there's some interesting kind of like playing off of others and seeing what people do and bouncing off and like reading into what people play. It was really, really fun. Didn't quite feel like a trick taker per se, where there's like, you know, suits and following suits and like values and ranks and stuff. It kind of just felt more like an action selection game, but it was really cool. It was a really fun kind of like trick-taking-ish game to play. Next we played, it's DTwww, which is a wild game. The premise is it's trick-taking with dice, which has been done before, and I think I should do a whole month, I think, on trick-taking games with dice. I know there's Throne, Operation Master. We covered Dados, which is by Tucke, which was fun. And this game, oh, there's Lambda dice too. But this game, DTwww, has a wild cover. But also, the premise is if you win a trick with the die, it goes into like a little cup that you'll roll later. And the interesting thing is, so low number wins, so if you win with a low number, that die goes into a cup for later. But later, everyone rolls the dice that they won with, and then highest value wins. So it's a really cool push and pull, because as you're drafting the dice, you want to draft like somewhat higher cards or higher dice, because later on, if you do somehow win with them, you'll get to roll those and they'll be super high for seeing who won, right? But also, like, you're risking rolling them and getting high numbers for trick taking, so it's kind of a moot point anyway. So that was fun. The trick play itself was just like, woof, it was super, super wacky. There's a lot of like if this then that rules and a lot of flowchart. And once like a game has too much like flowchart, like, oh, if this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Oh, but then if that happens, then actually this happens. It kind of, you know, it kind of washes over me and I just get a little like glazed over. So I think the trick play was a little more streamlined. There's a really cool idea for a game there, especially because as you draft, it's encouraged to like feel the dice to see which die you want, because there's still different suits, so you don't know what suit you're getting, but like you could feel for like a D20 as opposed to like a D8 or like a D4 or whatever, right? Because there's a bunch of different dice in the game. So cool idea. Maybe streamlined rules would really make it really fun, but as it is with the rules, it was like kind of a little wonky. Then that night, James and I played a couple of designs from Japan that were part of like a standard deck competition that were for 2-player only. One of them was like, meh. I don't even remember it too much. Another one was okay. The premise was like, you draw cards back and forth and then deal to a dummy. And you keep going until one person is like, I think I can win all the tricks, or I think I can slough all the tricks. And the person who declares that gets to control the dummy as well. So there's kind of an interesting like balance of like, when do you call it? It was cool. I feel like it could use a little bit more finessing, because we played one hand and it was like, it kind of was just like, okay. So I feel like if there's a little bit more to it, it'd be a really interesting game. But as it was just like, whatever. Later on in on the last day, we played another design from there that was like a 3-player only one, which I'll talk about in a bit, but that one was really, really cool. It was called like Zaraba 21 or 22 or 23, some number. But yeah, I'll talk about that in a bit. It was great because this day was actually my actual birthday, and James, so kind, oh my gosh, found out that I like LaCroix, so stocked the fridge with LaCroix for this LaCroix boy. But also, there were pastries and brought a candle, which was very sweet, and it was nice to celebrate a birthday doing the best stuff in the world, drinking LaCroix and playing trick-taking games. Like, what could you ask for more? We didn't play this game, but it was really interesting because I took a photo of it. The premise is like, you're quack doctors, and you have a certain doctor type, like specialty, like acupuncture or bloodletting or like whatever your thing is. But it's may follow where there's a patient with like a value, and when you play to the trick, you can play, the suits are actually the color of the doctors. It's like one suit is like acupuncture, and so you can play acupuncture to the trick, and if players like agree and play too much acupuncture to the trick, the patient like dies, and then it's blamed on the acupuncture doctor. So we didn't play it, but it was just insane. I mean, like, look at this art. This was the last day, and it started with playing this game, which was like cats taking over. It was like stray cats taking over a town, which is a hilarious theme. But it's by Kuro, who designed these two games. And the premise on that one is kind of like Cat in the Box. It's area kind of blocking. You want to win certain cards. So the flow is the leader will pick a card, you'll fight over it, and the first and second place will put a pawn on there, and then third and fourth place will take some cubes from there, and the cubes help you mitigate a later trick. Like a cube might let you flip the card from going from like a 2 to like a 13, like just flip it to be like from the weakest to the strongest. Or another cube might pull the card in suit, because only the strongest of the lead suit wins. And then another cube type just is like a majority, like whoever collects most of that cube gets points. So it was interesting, especially because these two games were very power heavy. A lot of kind of wackiness can happen, and that one was very kind of reserved in comparison to those other two games. So it was nice to play from the same designer, kind of a game that had a more kind of singular focus. Then I taught Brian Boru. It was interesting because so many people wanted to play. It swelled to like a 5-player game. I forgot that game's a little bit of a bear to teach. There's a lot in the kind of cleanup phase of that game, which I think it landed okay, but it was a lot to kind of front load and be like, you do this and then this and then this and then this, Then we'll move on to this section where during cleanup you do this and then this and then this and then this. Then we'll go over here to do this and this. So it was good. It was just like probably a lot, especially in the morning. Then we played Taiki Shinzawa's auction game, Suroborous, and it is so much fun. Played it twice in a row, and the funny thing about that game is to be able to score it all, you need to win cards with stars on it, which is like, I think, a fifth of the deck or something, like a fourth of the deck. And in both games, I did not do that. So way to go, Taylor. But it was really fun. The premise is like, you have these circles where you can bid any amount, but if you bid that circle, you get to cover it up, and you want to be covering them up to score more points, essentially. So it was cool because it was an auction game where you can kind of bank on what your opponents are going to bid, because you can see in front of them that they want to bid certain amounts. So you can play off that and kind of read into that and like have a gauge of what they will bid when it comes to them. So that was really fun. Then back to trick taking, we played Chris Ray's word trick taking game, which was super, super fun. It had competitive rules, but we played the cooperative version, which is said to be, I think, a little bit more fun. But the premise is, so we played at 4 players, you play a card to the trick, and it's a must follow. But after all the cards have been played, you have to make a word with those 4 cards. And there's only a few amount of vowels. And it was really, really fun. I love word games. So it was fun to bounce off like trick-taking mindset, but also still trying to like make a word and flex that limited vocabulary that I have. It's interesting because the game allowed for a pretty loose amount of cooperation, or like loose rules in terms of cooperation. Like you could say how many vowels you had, you can say which suits you were short in. Like there was a lot of communication, which I felt was going to be a little too loose for me. And like in some ways I think it was, but also it was a hard enough game to where you kind of needed that. So it felt great though. I really liked the play of it. There are fun moments where I think just in any word game you get those fun moments where like you're trying your hardest to make a word out of like squirb, and you're like, there's got to be a word here. Squirb? Smurb? Snurb? Like, I don't know. That's just inherently funny to me. And the trick play was fun enough to like facilitate some really cool wordplay. So yeah, I don't know when this is coming out, but I hope it does, because I think Chris has got like a really, really fun game on his hand. Next we played My Favorite Carrera, and there was like one small rule off that made it to where the game kind of just didn't function. It was interesting because we played with people who were so good at trick taking, we just knew something was off. A lot of times I'll play a game and think something's off, and then check and either it is or isn't off, you know? But sometimes when you're playing trick taking and like the incentives aren't there, or just things are wonky, you're like, something's wrong. So it was fun. I think it is a promising game with like all the rules set up, but we ended up just playing a couple hands because it was just like a little too off. Then we played this wild game, which is like something about a jewels thief. Let me see if I have the name here, but it's by the designer of Cat in the Box, who has designed a few really interesting games. I mean, Cat in the Box is wildly interesting. But I found the name here. I think it's Jewel Thief's Letter of Warning. Who knew? But the premise is, if you ever match colors of the lead suit, you have to take like a crystal from your card, like matching the color crystal on your card. And you don't want crystals in pairs. So if you get a blue and a yellow crystal, that's like bad, essentially. But if you just get all one color, you're fine. It's kind of like Mint, Liste, and Tucke, where if you get all of one color, it's like that color times 0. But if you get like a bunch of pairs, or even just like a lot of one color and then like 1 or 2 of the other color, then it's bad because it's like multiplication. And it was interesting. I think the rules were like pretty overwrought for what the game ended up being. I think if it was like a little more simplified and like you could get playing pretty quick, it'd be nice. But there's like, the deck had like a million different like caveats that like kind of never happened, and then like a lot of weird flowcharty rules. But it was fun. It was tense to kind of plan your hand to get all of one diamond suit and then Really try not to get the last other diamond suit. There's fun like pacing to the game. So I think there's definitely something there, but might need to be a little bit more honed. Then I just went upstairs and looked at a bunch of the crazy games in James' collection. It's like, there was a weird frog game. There's this game, which was absolutely wild. As you can see, maybe I'll like zoom in here, but there's a bunch of different weird poses with like realistic faces on the cards, and the cards are super small. They're like that big. And then on top of that, there's like see-through cards, like translucent cards. I don't know why. And then at the bottom, there was like this like 3-leaf clover with a heart coin. And the cover is just like some person sitting there with like a tail. That was a wild game. And I mean, just like this collection had a bunch of really interesting games in it. Overall, it was just like so much fun to look at all the different trick-taking designs, and especially out of Japan. Japan has just like inherently a wacky nature to a lot of their productions, whether from the art or from even the components. So it was really fun to just look through and just see like kind of like a feast on the eyes of like wild trick-taking games. The next game we played was Stichtag out of Germany, where the hook is you play a different trick-taking game every day. So you look at the month, the day, tens place, and the day, ones place, and that makes a unique combination for the year of a game where there's 3 different rules that combine to be something different. It's kind of like 504, that Friedman Freeze game where, you know, you make a random game every time. We played a few hands of it, different combinations. Each of them fell flat. The deck is just like pretty big, lots cut out. It's pretty wacky. Some of the rules are just kind of like, we looked at like the most common rules too, and those were like, so I'm sure there's some good ones in there, but it kind of fell flat on the few hands we tried. But there's so many games, right? There's 365. I'm sure one of them's good. So hopefully try for a few other days and see if any of those are good. Then we played Zaraba 22. This is the one I was mentioning. Out of Japan, that's like a standard deck trick taker. So 3-player only. But the super fascinating hook is the lead player leads 2 cards to the trick, and the second player has a huge decision where they have to follow suit with one of them. The one they don't follow suit on goes to this marketplace where the value of the card counts as like this bust meter. It's kind of like blackjack, where if you hit 21 or more, then it busts. So if it does bust, every card that you take from capture tricks that has the same suit of a busted suit is a -1 point. But if it doesn't bust, you count the number of cards up at that market, and those cards are worth that many points. So like, if up in the market's like the 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That's under 21. That is 4 points per that suit. So it's a really interesting like market manipulation game mixed with like a clever lead for 3 players only. It was really, really fun. I want to show a bunch more people, especially because it's a standard deck game, and it's really cool to show people those and have that as like a tool in the belt whenever people are like, oh, what's like your favorite standard deck trick taker? And you whip that one out. Then we played Magicaligraphy, which is wild. It's this social deduction game where one person might be a magician who doesn't know what symbol everyone's trying to draw with this like magic feather. Absolutely wild. A little bit of setup, but it wasn't too bad. It was pretty quick and super fascinating. It was social deduction where during the final part, you actually don't talk at all. It's just quiet. In the second someone points at someone, like accuses someone, then you only have 10 seconds. So it was interesting how a majority of the game is watching people and like sussing things out, but once it gets to like the final like, okay, who's the traitor? It's super quick. So it was pretty cool to see in like a social deduction game where there's like not much discussion at the end. Well, literally none. Then we played Crocodile at 3 players, which was really fun to do. I didn't know how it would work, but it works pretty smooth. Played Crocodile at 4, which is great. I haven't played Crocodile in a while, so that was a blast to kind of go back to back on there. We played this one game called Bright Sight. You have towers, right? And you put this like cannon piece. It's just this like metal. It's like a wooden cylinder. And then you have another wooden cylinder. Ooh, I'm losing it. And you whack it as hard as you can, and then that shoots at the other person's tower and tries to knock it down. Super, super fun. I'm always on the hunt for dexterity games that are new and fresh, or just use a different type of dexterity that I haven't seen. And I haven't seen that whole like whacking tower knocking down motion. It was really fun to watch. Then we played a hand of Moo, which was really fun. It's one one of the older ones, like classic ones that I've been meaning to try for a while now. And I can see now, having played a hand or two, just how clever and kind of classic it is, and how if you played it a lot, it could be like a lifestyle game that you can get really, really good at. I liked it. Yeah, I don't know much more to say because it feels like I'm just scratching the surface on this like giant iceberg of a game, but it was really, really fun. So that's the last trick taker. These rests are just going to be wild. I don't know what to tell you, but here we go. So we played Linkage, which was insane. The premise is everyone has both their hands as like this color, and this deck is shuffled with 5 cards per hand, per color, pinky to thumb, and then you shuffle both sticks and you randomly flip up 2, and a stick, this wooden stick, has to go between those 2 fingers. So it could be my ring finger on one of my hands to like someone else's pinky, right? So then we do that, and there's like this wooden rod there, right? And then you flip it over, and it could be 2 other people's like thumb to pointer, and then the stick goes there, and then it might be your pointer on this hand to like your thumb on your other hand. So then you're doing this with someone else, and you're doing this with yourself, and it just keeps going. And you just keep going as much as you can. And as you can see, it got very insane. It got to the point where we only played 2 games of it, but afterward, everyone was like, oh my gosh, like your muscles, like your Popeye muscles. I'm like a 3-year-old describing anatomy here. But your forearms, thank you, Train, were just insanely ripped and super tired. Then we played Lum Lum Party, which is like bingo, but you have a little bit of a say in what numbers come up, and you have a little bit of a say in what your bingo card is. I thought it was great. I didn't quite grasp the strategy, whatever strategy there may be, but there definitely is better play, because I got like 20 points or 30 points, and James got like 130. So I was definitely missing something, but really, really fun. I love the idea that like you play bingo, but players have agency on what numbers come up. And it was really fun to just like collectively beg for certain people to please just go to this number, but they didn't have it on their sheet, so they didn't care. And then just feel the pain as you and another player's number just kept getting skipped. It was really fun. I love like games with camaraderie and misery. The final game we played was Stella, which is like a Dixit push your luck game, and it was so much fun. It was awesome because the people at the table were adventurous and very risky. They really pushed the limits on definitions in that game. The premise is like, you look at all these Dixit cards, just all these like portraits and paintings and stuff, and it's like, which ones remind you of like hope or like jealousy, right? And then you pick which ones you think, but if you pick too many, you like get penalized. But I played with people who were just like, oh yeah, this random alligator, that reminds me of jealousy. Like, it was just like any connection they went for, and I loved it. It was great. So that was Trick Taking Con T7. Easily one of the best cons I've ever do, one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had. Everyone there was so nice and warm and welcoming, just walking around and everyone being like, oh, come to the table, and being like, oh, hey, if you want to learn a certain game, I'll definitely teach it, or is there anything you wanted to play, and just so sweet and nice. And the conversations were always fun, and it was cool hanging out with people who love trick taking and could kind of geek out and nerd out on such a strange genre. And Dale and James, who helped put it on and facilitate everything, were just so sweet and so kind and accommodating. So it was just an absolute blast of a weekend from start to finish, and I can't gush how much fun it was. So thanks for everyone being there, and thanks for watching me ramble about such a fun weekend for probably, I mean, I haven't edited this yet because I'm filming it currently. That's how time works. But for probably way too long. So I should just end it now. Thanks so much for watching.